Welcome to CIO Leadership Live Australia. I'm Kathy O'Sullivan, Editorial Director for Foundry's Enterprise and Channel Brands in Australia and New Zealand. On today's episode, I'm delighted to be joined by David Gee, a highly experienced global CIO who is just about to retire from his role as Global Head of Technology, Cyber and Data Risk at Macquarie Group. David is also a first-time author and has just launched his new book, The Aspiring CIO and CISO. Welcome to the podcast, David. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Kathy.
So look, tell us a bit about your career in technology. How did you get your start in IT and what have been some of your career milestones?
I think I've been really lucky. Honestly, the journey sort of started. I finished university at Sydney University studying business, and I was married with a kid, and so I wanted to go and do things that were challenging and fun. And yes, I was sort of financially motivated, but I was also saying I don't want to be stuck in any job. So that was sort of my principles. I didn't quite know exactly what I wanted to do, but I got a management trainee role with NRMA IAG Insurance here in Australia, one of the largest insurance in Australia. And it was kind of counterintuitive because the banks offered me roles with half-price loans. And I was like, I could take that, but then I'll end up being stuck there. So I'm going to do that. And so I went on this path of being a management trainee where I think, I was doing all the normal things that put you through to go to a branch and serve customers and write insurance, handle claims, handle customers' complaints per counter. But I was really fortunate that within 5-6 months, I was asked then to come and run an IT project. And I had no clue what I was doing. I was just put in charge of this program. We're going to be one of these short-term tactical programs to take some systems from finance and adapt them for claims recoveries. And it's supposed to be in place for 1 or 2 years. It was in place for 10 years. But for me, I was kind of hooked. This whole idea of running projects and leading change was interesting. So I kind of pivoted, if I could, Kathy, towards how do I do more of this? And so I sort of volunteered to get into a business analyst role. Found my way from, after 3 years with NRMA, over to Fairfax Publishing, which was the newspapers and television, radio stations. And I was actually doing an analyst role, lots of things like PC support, running PCs, running networks, running cables, coding, testing, doing all kinds of stuff. Because back then it was sort of moving from mainframes to mini computers, and I was sort of in that really early stages of the very first IBM PCs. So I'm aging myself here, but first IBM PCs, first Apple leases I worked with. Sort of fun to do that. I got promoted to another company called Pioneer Concrete, which is a very blokey, male-dominated industry for bricks and tiles and concrete. As the PC manager for a very small team, about 2 or 3. But what happened to me, Kathy, was I was asked to come and run the application development team after about 6 months. And I was at the age of 28, I was sort of leading this team of 45. And they were doing all development, all the support for all the mainframe system, mini computer systems for the company. I had this, responsibility, but I was really good at management of people, but I was way out of my depth. I had people working for me that had master's degrees and PhDs in IT, and I was, just had a PC programming background. So I had to go and do some postgrad studies and learn. So that kind of led me down to the path where I was fortunate that then they fired the CIO. They said, David, you're too young to take this job, but can you actually work with the business and actually make this first transformation? It's my first sort of transformation project. I think it was about 32, 33. And the next 3 years, I ran an all enterprise transformation project. Fun, didn't sleep very much, renovate my house at the same time. So I would like to do this both ends of the candle. And then that pivoted to me towards how do I do more of this sort of architecting transformation? And, I think I love the cut and thrust and the vibe of change. And so EY offered me a role as a senior manager, and I basically said, I'd love to do this, and make me a partner within 2 years. So they kind of laughed, but they offered me a partnership within 2 years, and I didn't have this sort of choice to. And in my book, I went to this garden in Kyoto, Japan, which is called Loanji. It's the most famous Zen garden in Japan, and I had these 3 offers in my hand to go to 2 consulting firms as partner, or or go and join Lilly Lilly for the pharmaceutical company on this sort of CIO path. And they promised me this path of saying, David, we'll put you through an MBA, sign you up, put you on share stocks and all the nice stuff, and then send you overseas after you finish the MBA, which is, they said, maybe China or Japan or US, which is what I did. I then became a CEO for China, Asia, Japan, US, and that expanded. Incredible sort of scale of organizations. And then I'll stop and talk about Kathy, but I think I could have had lots of fun doing, investment banking, retail banking, insurance. I did some VC stuff. I worked at HSBC as a CISO and now I've been doing risk. So I've done many different things and always challenged myself to find myself in that sort of uncomfortable space to learn faster.
Yeah, it's certainly a role that's taken you to a number of places around the world. And look, as you said, you've now written this book for aspiring CIOs and CISOs. So what was the motivation behind writing the book?
Yeah, I learned very quickly that I'm going to grow more if I make myself uncomfortable and put myself in positions where I'm on the fringes of my own expertise. And so rather than sitting comfortable and being pretty in, one little job forever, I said, okay, how do I reinvent myself and keep learning? So I kind of found that having run transformations, I wanted to first transform myself. So I kind of had this idea that I have to inspire myself first. I want to inspire others. And so that means transforming myself, being able to move between different industries, different countries. And I worked in 5 different countries. Moving industries is often not that common because people often stick into pharmaceutical or financial services and don't mix between. And I thought that was a great challenge for me to do that. And I think to many ways, Kathy, it goes back to, going back to my school days in high school. And I went to a place called Newington College in Sydney, and I was captain of the basketball team. And the coach came to me and said, David, I know you're the best shooter, but actually we want you to do something different. We want you to pass the ball and don't shoot. And I was like, what do you mean? Because I'm a good shooter, right? And he said, no, we want you to be the captain, so therefore you need to pass the ball. And that was my first moment, about when I was 17, to be uncomfortable, to say, well, actually, I'm going to a place that I don't understand. I like shooting, but you want me to pass instead. And so that sort of led me down this path of thinking, how do I do something that's a little different and grow myself differently? And so that was part of the motivation for thinking this way. And then the book thing was actually then, okay, how do I put what I've learned into practice on paper? I've loved coaching my colleagues into CIO and CISO roles, and I've had this role where I've moved every 3 years to another country, another company, reinvented myself, and then I've had also then to accelerate the development of people working for me. And so that was sort of something I did. I don't know if necessarily all my peers will do that, because they sometimes might feel a bit threatened by that. But in my case, it was my job to find my successor and grow them. And so in many ways, I kind of built this in one of my superpowers. How do I identify talent quickly, put them in positions where they're comfortable and grow? And hence the book talks about that, in terms of being the CIO or CISO. And actually, I sort of encourage people to think about both as a career path.
So then how do you think the role of CIO has changed since you first started out all those years ago?
Gosh. Yeah, there's been sort of this 5 big tsunamis of the internet, the PCs, the mobility, the cloud, and now AI coming through. During that period of time, the titles have changed for sure. They're from the PC, so DP manager, ADP manager, MIS manager, all these different titles. But at the same time, I think the role of the CIO has sort of been split, because the CIO then becomes the CTO, the Chief Digital Officer, the Chief Data Officer, the Chief Transformation Officer. Now there's the Chief AI Officer. In many ways, has this been because the CIO hasn't been able to handle it all? Perhaps, but it's been too much for one person to handle, and they've kind of split the role into multiple pieces. And I think this will keep pivoting this way, I think, because of the regulatory push, the time conflicts that CIO has to be able to focus on tech, cyber, data, AI, etc., is enormous. And so the role will keep pivoting, I think.
And then, the role of CISO then, it is evolving as well. What's your view on, I guess, in many cases, security leaders are still reporting to the CIO. When do you think an organization should have that CISO role reporting directly to the CEO?
That's a great question. I think I've seen often there's been times where the CISO comes into conflict because of the situation. It kind of depends a lot upon the CIO. Some CIOs, and I've worked with some great ones who are massively supportive of cybersecurity and want to support it in every single way, right? And see it as one of their number one priorities. Not all CIOs feel that way. Some CIOs see it as being career limiting and they stay away as far as they can travel, which is interesting for me coming from a CIO background. You're kind of saying, hey, we need to do this, Mr. CIO or Mrs. CIO. And they go, oh, I don't want to do the MFA. That's too hard. And so I think, it's tricky. I think it does make sense. I know a recent example of a company in Australia that I won't name, but they're putting the CISO with a dotted line to the chief risk officer and to the CIO. So that way you've got some counterbalance. Yeah, but if I think about two key examples in my career, many organizations will run red teams to go and test themselves and make sure that their cybersecurity defenses are indeed sound, right, and find how hackers will get through the organization. I've talked to red team members and leaders who've said, David, when I worked for, not for the CIO, I had sort of full compliance to do attacks on anything I wanted to attack on, any country, any division of the organization, versus being told, don't go over there now because it's come back next year. And so that sort of thing, when you think about that equivalence between the red team and the audit have got complete independence and go off to find the issues. I think similarly also, the boards all want to know about the cyber risk quantification, right? What's a real cyber position? Do we know how much risk is on the table? Now, I'm also seeing, the risk quantification teams being moved from second line into first line, and then suddenly they become less effective and their reports are less punchy because they're now being influenced by the CIO. And so it depends upon the CIO being, totally honest and transparent about things. If they are, then it can work. Otherwise, you need that counterbalance. Otherwise, it becomes an issue.
Now, look, cybersecurity is a massive challenge for any leader in Australia. But what are some of the other big challenges you think are facing CIOs in this region in 2024? Is there anything about this region that you think differs from elsewhere when it comes to the CIO role?
I think there's a number of things. And firstly, we do act as fast adopter technology in this region. So the velocity of change is always going to be at third, fourth gear. That's not going to change at all. I think the geopolitical situations, with us being in the Five Eyes alliance, does put us, square and center of some attacks, and we will therefore get more of our share because of that. So the CEO needs to be very cyber savvy, and as a result, we also seen the regulators being terribly active in this space. Right? They really worry and concerned about this space a lot. So we're getting lots of attention from regulators.
So what strategies then have you found effective when navigating those, rapid tech changes and the digital transformations, and that are just so essential now in today's business environment?
It's a great question. I think maybe 5 things I would point out. There's so much change happening. So how do you focus on fundamentals? How do you build a strong team that can cope with the change? And the mental resilience of your team members is really important because they're constantly getting a barrage of requests and changes and projects and programs and coming from all sides and from outside as well, from regulators, etc. And so they're under a lot of stress to deliver. And so how do you make sure that you focus on that? I think having a really good plan, having a good strategy and architecture roadmap is important. And as a CEO, making sure that one of your key success criteria is driving simplicity and not allowing complexity to creep into the organization over time. I think the third thing I would say is that data and information management is so important. We're all hearing the bandwagon about AI, but you can't actually do AI without data being in a good place. So unfortunately, many CEOs actually don't spend a lot of time on data, and they do need to spend more attention in the space because it does require leadership and governance to push. And so I think the final thing probably is reinforcing what I've said previously, demand management. How do you manage stakeholders and be able to say no and get them to still be aligned, understand that these things are what we're going to focus on, and here's the other areas you're going to maybe deprioritize for the time being, because you can't really do everything. You can't boil the ocean. The job of the CEO is tough when there's so many demands. So how do you then get people to accept the fact that your special request is going to be on my second list, not my first list?
Yeah, it's so essential, isn't it? And of course, as you say, evolving role and lots of demands on them. So what do you think are some of those key leadership qualities and skills, that are crucial for a successful CIO, particularly, I guess, in those mid-career stages?
Yeah, great questions. And I think, I did talk about this in my book in terms of the top 10 soft skills that CIOs and CSOs both need. And they do differ outside of the top 10, but the top 10 aspects are very, very similar. So number one, just leadership is important. Be able to lead teams through change and through conflict is important. Strategic thinking is important because, without making the right choices, then a team's just being burnt. Communications, really, really key for these roles. And for the CIO and CISO, how do you communicate well? How do you communicate internally, externally with regulators, stakeholders, etc. Being a problem solver is really important as well, because I think you can't just buy technology. It's all about thinking about what's the business problem we're trying to solve here. How do we enable that? Now, I think the fifth one to me is risk management, because we've got to then use trade-offs to say, if I do this project, I can reduce risk for the organization, and as well as maybe making revenue, and trying to make that sort of trade-off. But there's a few other ones that I'll just name more quickly. But being adaptable, because the world's changing so quickly, so you can't be fixed in concrete. You need to be a bit fluid and understand, and the world's changing. So that requires personally commitment to continuous learning. That you're always thinking, what am I going to learn this year? What are the things I'm going to put on my list to strengthen myself? Emotional intelligence is important because you're dealing with difficult emotional situations, and so whether it's a major incident, tech disruption incident, or a cyber incident, be able to divorce yourself from the emotions and be able to work through that. Important. And the last three things are time management, team building, and ethics. And ethics is sort of at the end, but really important, because without good ethics, what you're doing makes no sense if people don't follow you, because they won't really believe in what you're saying.
Absolutely. A CIO is only as good as their team. So tell us a bit more then about your approach on, I guess, building and leading high-performing IT teams. Are there any kind of specific techniques or philosophies that have worked well for you in that regard?
Thanks, Andy. As I mentioned, I got into management really early, and so I had to learn both at work and outside of work. And I was involved with a Dragon Boat team, would you believe, in my early days. And we trained a lot, but we ended up representing Australia a few times in Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong. Now, teams of 20 people are paddling with the boats. It's not all about strength; it's about timing. So, if people aren't coordinated well, and then actually the boat doesn't go fast as it can go, and so teamwork's really, really important. But I kind of learned, that it's not about high-performing teams is not necessarily about hiring the best people, because sometimes you can't because of your budget constraints. What you're trying to do is get the people to be the best version of themselves they can be. And so I get two examples I'll talk about. And one's actually the question around who came second in the Rio men's 4x100 relay. And it's not who you think, because who came first was Jamaica, of course, right? Who came second was not the America, but it was actually the Japanese team. And the Japanese team did not have any members of the 100 meters race that actually got into the finals or semifinals. But what they did was they had amazing ability to run at the best of their ability and do that baton exchange. And so, to me, the algorithm, and I quote this in my book, is actually saying you've got a team member, 4 team members, one who's 8 out of 10, And on their best days, they can run at 9 out of 10. David here is a bit slow. So he's running at 5 out of 10 best days, right? But if you push him and really motivate him, he can get to 6, et cetera, et cetera. So you got this algorithm of people. And then what you want to do is make sure that it's not a minus. There's not bad teamwork, but actually there's a multiplication. So at the end of the day, when you do the sum, it's very simple, right? How do you get the people to be the best version of themselves and actually they work well together? High-performing teams then have the best outcomes and outputs. And so it seems a little cold and mathematical, but actually it's very true. How do you coach David to not be a 5 out of 10, but be a 7 out of 10? How do you do that? How do you encourage him to think about, changing his stride pattern or something that's a bit different and being uncomfortable with changing his style? And so, yeah, that's what I've kind of learned from sports and then applying it to business and testing it.
Now, when you reflect back on your own career, David, is there any, mistakes that you might have made or lessons that you've learned along the way that really shaped you as a leader?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good question. And embarrassingly enough, right, being a transformation person, I learned I want to go fast. I want to make change happen. And I learned very quickly that I need to bring people with me. Just buying widgets is not going to get me there. And so for many years, I focused on it. I wrote in my development plan, bring people with me, make others own the change with me. And so it was not David's change, but actually our change, and we all bought into it. And so that was something I've been focused on for many years. When you talk to my team, they say, no, you're fantastic at this, David. I said, no. I was bad at this. I just focused on it because I knew that it was something I want to get changed fast, but I can't get changed fast unless people buy into it and understand fundamentally why we're doing this, and then what's my role in this. And then, in the end, you may actually not have a job, right? You may be working yourself out of a job, but they really believe in the change. And so once that's in place, it's better. But I think the other thing was actually, I've always been very strategic, thinking high level, 10,000 feet, don't care about the details. And so knowing the details has been something as well that I had to learn, because I was recognized that I had bosses that I want you to know these fine details, and I had to force myself to not only to think about the strategy, but actually say, okay, if I need to, I can go down to line level and budgets and explain why we got this and how, and therefore how we can actually take 20% of my budget and fund a transformation, because I actually know this won't impact people. I know this won't impact anything from a risk standpoint. It's actually some things that we can actually manage well. So having that level of detail makes me uncomfortable, because I don't want to know that detail, but I've learned in my career is that's really important to embrace that and then be able to, go down that level of detail to solve problems we need to.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And look, love to finish on a positive note. So what are you most excited about for the CIOs of the future?
Wow. I'm excited and scared for them, I think, at the same time. Think about this intersection of tech, cyber, data is kind of challenging, because, as I said before, the CIOs aren't necessarily been strong in data. They may not be strong at cyber, but actually the intersection of all these sectors actually makes it really important that they are embracing it all. Because if you take example, if you're a cybersecurity CISO, okay, if you don't understand data well, and don't understand AI, you're in big trouble. And most CISOs actually don't spend a lot of time on data and AI, but they need to. So I think the CIO as the leader of that group needs to actually step up, role model, embrace the change, and themselves, and make people know that actually I'm not really good in blah of these four, and we need to, as a group, all learn that and understand how do we use these more effectively, because the business is demanding it. Business wants this because it's really where the world's going towards, the intersection of all these areas. So being able to have that sweet spot is really, really important.
Absolutely. And look, where can people go to find your book?
Oh my gosh, thank you, Kathy. Look, I've got Amazon globally. I've got it listed. I've got Barnes & Noble. I've got in Australia Booktopia. I think there's about 15 places that have listed it. It's been a really fun journey to launch it and then see the whole process, and then also see that how well it's been received even after 3 days. And so I saw it peaking into the bestseller list in different countries, which is sort of fun. And to me, it's not about ego. Actually, it's actually how do I do what I've been doing, coaching people, and more broadly through my book. And so I've had so many requests for people to mentor in the last few weeks and months, and I'd love to what I can do, but it's really, 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 really exciting.
Excellent stuff. Well, congratulations on the book, and thank you so much for joining us on CIO Leadership Live today.
Thanks, Kathy.